Hello everyone, I can finally talk about Shenmue III. I did my first impressions after a few hours of gameplay, and this last weekend I finished the game finally, and I can talk about my overall experience. And this will be a little different from some of my reviews, especially if you watch some of my older videos. This is not so much reviewing the game in, say, the way like IGN or someone would do that. It's more of just talking about my experience. So you could call it a review, but I think it's more just talking about my overall experience rather than a real review of the game, getting into the nitty-gritty and comparing it to things and giving it a number rating, that type of thing. This is more just talking about what was my individual experience without thinking about any outside influences and just none of that stuff. So Shenmue III, as you know from watching my channel, is a game I've been waiting for, like many of you, for nearly 2 decades, and have been really into the promotion of it and the excitement about it, and at the same time the worrying about what's happening and the delays after delays, and finally getting the true product, the dream come true. Well, was it a dream come true? For me, we'll find out. But actually getting Shenmue 3, holding it in my hands, an actual copy of Shenmue 3, still feels like this insane thing, and the possibility that there's going to be, well, not even possibility, there's going to be a Shenmue 4. We're going to see 4, maybe 5 and 6 finish a story. Who knows where it's going to go and what form from now, but I really think the Shenmue is back on track and ready to move forward. That's my hope. But yeah, finally, Shenmue 3. Finally had the experience after such a long wait. And for me, it was worth it. It's one of those games where review scores, a lot like Death Stranding, which came out very recently, it's going to be very, very low or very, very high. It's going to be one of those games that really divides people for a couple of different reasons. One, because the style of game that it is something that's just not going to be for everyone. It is something that forces you almost to really take your time, to really be slow-paced and to think about and experience things, and it has those moments of fast-paced action, but those are little highlights in between vast expanses of an almost contemplative view of the world. You're really thinking about things and experiencing things, and in a way almost projects itself inward to where you start having those moments of not necessarily boredom, but just this quiet contentment, and these moments of where you just take some time to think about the world around you, and it makes you almost think about yourself, almost has this inward perspective that the environment takes you, which is true to Shenmue 1 and 2. It is so something that's not everyone is going to enjoy. Not everyone is going to like the day-in-the-life elements of walking around, talking to people, actually having to do a job for money, whether it's, you know, picking up boxes, whether it's, you know, in this, driving the forklift, chopping wood, you know, catching ducks, those kinds of things. Not everyone's going to enjoy those elements, and it's something that's just, the pacing of it is not for everyone. It's not for people that just want fast-paced action. It's for people that want to slow down, take their time, and have these almost life sim elements portrayed in a way that makes them almost feel like arcade games. You know, everything from, you know, chopping wood is a great example, to where it's something that is mundane and feels like real effort, to where I need this certain amount of money, I need to move forward, I need to continually pay my bill at the hotel, I need to get money for food, I need money for these things. I have to actually work to earn things if I want to do these things. I want extra money for capsule toys, I have to do extra labor to get there. It's very, you know, intensive in that way, but it's done in a way where that mundane activity feels like an old school arcade game, especially with, you know, as you start doing better, the music changes, and then, you know, for a very good, and then you get an extraordinary, and music changes a second time, and there are different track changes depending on who you're chopping wood for. You know, I love the one where the second track change is the music from Joy's Motorcycle, Shenmue 2, just different things like that, where it has this old school arcadey feel to elements of the mundane, and the whole game and the gameplay perspective and the pacing and everything it's very bold in that it stays true to what Shenmue 1 and 2 were, and it's going to be one of those things where some people are going to just simply not like it because it feels, in terms that they would be thinking it would feel dated, it would feel old, it would feel like it didn't adapt to modern conventions. But then on the flip side, that's exactly why I love it, because I love that it made that choice. If it did feel more modern, it would feel too separated from Shenmue 1 and 2, and I wouldn't like it, because what I want, really, what I helped back, what I have been hoping for, gave money towards, been waiting for, is Shenmue 3. Not a modern adaptation of what Shenmue was, but a Shenmue 3. Shenmue 1, 2, and 3, and this is 100% true Shenmue 3. Whether you like it or not is based on whether or not you like Shenmue or not, because this is Shenmue 3. That's just what it is. And I love that, because I love 1 and 2. And I love those elements. And some of the things that have changed, I actually prefer. I will go out there and say there is one element in this game that it is not my favorite so far in the series, but in every other aspect, it's my favorite. And we'll get into details why, but it's now my new favorite Shenmue game. And that's saying a lot after so many years. And Shenmue 1 and 2, there's one element of the entire experience that is not my favorite, but overall it is my favorite. And part of that, it's almost not a fair comparison, because part of that comes from the long wait and the excitement in 2015 on the E3 stage, and then 4 years of build-up after, a decade and a half of waiting before that. And you can't compare it to that experience. Even if Shenmue 4 comes out and it's a better game than 3, I probably won't like it as much as 3, just because this is going to be, no matter what happens in the series from now on, this is unique. The experience of this is unique, surrounding the impossibility of it existing whatsoever, and the long wait, and just that level of excitement and thrill and new experiences mixed with nostalgia and all these different things that have such an emotional core can't be repeated. It's not going to happen again. So I think it's almost, you can almost say almost unfairly my favorite, but it's my favorite because it's bolstered by the way I experienced it, and not just the experience itself, but the experience itself was incredible. As far as things that are sort of changed up gameplay-wise, and I guess I'll just talk about just in general gameplay and how you explore the world, because they're so intertwined. That's the thing that I love about Shenmue 1, 2, and 3, and 3 in particular, even more so than the others. I spent far more time doing that which is extra, that which is outside the realm of requirement to push the narrative forward. I spent far more time. I put roughly 30 hours or so in Bailu Village before I moved on, and I put over 40 then when I made it to the city. So I was somewhere in the neighborhood of 75 hours-ish, probably between there and 80 hours total that I put in. That's why this has been taking a little while to get to, because it takes a while. I mean, I'm playing it every possible second that I can to do that, because it was just so addictive in a hypnotic sense. It was something that was calming the rhythm of the day-to-day, whether you were in the village or once you got to the city. There was a different structure to sort of the daily grind and what I would do each day, and then breaking that up a bit when you get to story elements and everything from, I love, the turtle races and frog races and different gambling elements. Those were all fun. Things that were added to it that were so wonderful to spend so much time with. I mean, the chopping wood was just sort of almost meditative after a while. I got to the point where I don't even want to know how many real-life hours I spent doing that, because I just had so much fun. It was a great way to earn money, and again, I just kind of got into the rhythm to where, from the very first time I did it, I think I got like 60 or something ridiculous, to where towards the end, every single time, the lowest score I got was like a 120 something. Like, that was like, oh, I messed up. To where, the average was probably 130, 140. I was getting a lot of 150s. Like, it was just kind of, I just kept doing it. It was so much fun. And then the fishing, I wore for a long portion of the game that the rainbow catfish jacket they get for going and doing the fishing competition, doing that, like little things like that. Those were all added so much to where I just wanted to spend so much time. I didn't want to move forward many times because I was just doing so much and enjoying so much, and it felt more than any other experience within the realm of Shenmue, like I was living in those communities, even more than in Shenmue 1, which is kind of the one to look at for that element. Shenmue 2 had a bigger, broader story and moved you to different locations, and 1 was more of like, this is home, this feels like a hometown, this feels like you're living in that community. I felt that even stronger in Shenmue 3. In both instances, it happened twice. It was like the feeling of Shenmue 1 and then moved on to the feeling of Shenmue 2, but I'll talk about the city a little bit later, but it still had an element of home even more than Shenmue 2 did, to where the relationship with Shenmue 1. I just kept wanting to be involved in the lives of these people and explore everything. Collecting herbs was a great way to kind of make you explore the environments and out-of-the-way places out of sheer curiosity, and wanting to do all these things with all these side characters and trying to do everything in the game. I mean, I had the, the City Mogul achievement popped up, where you have over 10,000 before I even left Bailu Village. Like, I was just having fun. I wasn't doing it intentionally even. It was just sort of, I was playing as I wanted, without any real intent, and just enjoying the world and letting it take me through the narrative at the pace that it felt natural as I was playing. And it's one of those things where that ties into money and also the food element. It has a couple times where there is a money barrier, where at first you need the really expensive wine, and then later on you need the 5,000 for the move scroll and things like that. And each one of those times I had anywhere from 4 to 10 to 15, whatever. It was never an issue, because, and I don't think it's really set up as that much of an issue, because it's created in a way that almost forces you to really take your time and take this sort of meditative look at the world and really experience it, rather than actively try to push your way through it. And I actually like those almost barriers in a way in the beginning as you enter each new area, where you'll get to a road and Rio will turn around and be like, I should check around here first more, or talk to more people, or I shouldn't be going there yet. And I could see some people seeing that as a barrier, but for me, it never felt that way whatsoever, because it lended itself to the idea that every area has so much going on in it that you can almost thoroughly explore one area, move on, you just kind of keep going in that pattern as things very slowly expand through the course of the narrative, and then eventually you have, say, the whole of Bailu Village and the surrounding area, and you've gotten to know each place intimately by the time you get to that point. And then when you're revisiting and redoing things and doing side quests and making more money and whatever, it already feels like you live in that environment, and it's just even more enjoyable to do those things. I absolutely loved it. The stamina system, I know it's going to divide some people. I loved it because it tied into what I'm talking about, to where food wasn't just stuff to buy. It was an active part of your daily life within these environments. You had to eat. And the other thing too is, I think it depends on how you played it, how much of an annoyance or barrier it would be, because for me, within 4 hours of playing it, I completely maxed out the horse stance and 1-inch punch. And like, my endurance is so high, like, you go through, depending on what you're doing, whether you're doing things that are very active or things that are very passive, you might have to eat once or twice throughout the day. If you're just kind of playing the arcade or walking around talking, if you're running around or fighting, you have to eat a lot, yes. But to me, that also, I liked that. So it's like, the more active I am, the more I have to eat, the more I have to buy certain kinds of food, and I even got into like varying what food I was getting, like varying his diet in a way, just because it was interesting and fascinating, and played into that feeling of living in the environment rather than very just passively racing through. You are more actively participating over long periods of time in these places. And then you move on to the city, and it blew my mind. That is my favorite location in all of Shenmue now. Before, it was definitely the beginning of Shenmue 2, just because of the number of times I think I played Shenmue 2. Just that opening experience, that always felt meant to be my favorite. But this is my new favorite, and it was something where everything about the architecture fit to my taste as visually. And that just fit. I really loved the array of characters, both locations in Shenmue 3, but the city for some reason just stood out. And it was so dense. Not only is it vast, I mean, it's a huge expanse, and it opens up in the same way that the first area does, where it section by section things open up, and then eventually there's a gateway, and then the gate opens, and then you can eventually get through the yellow barrier at the dock, you know, to get into the fishing wharf and things like that. Things slowly unfold in a manner to which you're already so familiar and have an intimate relationship with each environment before you move on to the next, and it just opens up. I just loved every second of it. I loved how the elements of nature intertwined with the city too, where the areas where you could go out outside the city limits and back into small portions of the nature and, you know, the more natural environment, and it really mixed everything up and felt so wonderful. And it was a mix of a marketplace, you know, the promenade and things like that, with going up into the hills to, you know, the temples, or going down to, you know, like the scenery road and things like that. Like, there's so many different places that have such different feels all put together, and yet they come together seamlessly. And it just, I loved the flow of that area so much. And again, I spent over 40 hours just in that part of the game, just falling in love with every bit of it. And there's so much to do. I mean, you will go and it's like, holy cow, there's a second arcade in the city. And that ties into your work too when you're doing the forklift, which I actually ended up enjoying that even more than your job with the forklift in Shenmue 1. I just really, again, had so much fun doing that. And I loved how that tied into the world. You felt more like an active participant, because it wasn't just crates that you were moving back and forth. You actually saw items like statues and refrigerators and things like the dress stands and things like that that were related to things you were seeing in the actual shops. It felt like you were really participating in delivering things to these businesses, and you actually were with the arcade, where you go into the arcades and there are some machines that aren't working and missing, and as you bring them in from your job, you know, on the dock with a forklift, they start appearing in the arcade. So really, every single element of what you were doing felt like it had a purpose. Even the things that felt very extra and almost background and kind of time sinks in a way felt like they had a purpose. There was so much there. Getting into just the arcades and Smart Ball and all the gambling, and there's so much going on, and there are very few storefronts that were closed off to you. There were very few areas where I felt like I was just passing through and enjoying the view. Every step of the way there was someone to talk to, a store to go into, a complete scavenger hunt to make you want to search through every bit of the environment. And again, the herbs and finding plants and things played an important part, and finding different fishing spots. It was just incredible. Everything about it, I just was in love with it, and everything about it stayed so true to the tone, the look, the feel, the sound. Everything about this feels just like Shenmue, and the way I would describe it in the most simplest terms is that this doesn't feel like a modern game. It feels like a big budget remaster, not remake, but just a big budget HD remaster of a Dreamcast game. That's what it feels like, and to me, that's perfect, because that's exactly what I wanted. That's not what everyone's going to want. That's not what everyone is going to enjoy about the experience. But for me, just talking about my own personal perspective, I wanted a new Dreamcast game, and that's what I got. I got truly Shenmue III. Just looks a little more modern, but it doesn't portray the art and look of the original 2 to achieve that more modern look. I loved every element of this experience. The other thing that changed is the fighting system. And at first I was a little wary. It took a little bit of getting used to in the very beginning of Bailu Village, when you first reach that first dojo and you first kind of get into the fighting element of the gameplay, because it is very different feeling. I actually, after playing through it, I like it more. I prefer this system. That's again going to divide some people, because the first one was much more Virtua Fighter feeling than this. This feels very different. Feels kind of like Virtua Fighter mixed with Tekken in a way. If I was going to compare it to fighting games, that's like would be my closest comparison. And it just, for me, it ends up being just personal taste of gameplay. And I don't think one's better than the other. To me, I actually preferred this. I like the way it was set up. I got more into mastering the different move scrolls in this than I thought I was going to at first, and I actually ended up, again, like I went through and got all 30 sets of capsule toys and was so addicted to that, I wanted to try and get all the move scrolls just because I wanted to do that, not because of a goal of like I got to do this. I got to do everything. I just wanted to, and I was already naturally, without thinking, doing like 3/4 of everything anyway. So it's kind of like, I'm just going to finish up. I'm just going to do the last little bit because I was just spending so much time, and I enjoyed the way all those different training elements were a part of your progression, whether it's your attack or endurance or your martial arts level. Like, it really felt like you were growing as a character, and then again, how your endurance affects how much food you have to eat and how much you have to go through. It felt like he was actually growing as a character physically in many different ways, and his ability to do things. I just love the way everything tied in. So yeah, that's kind of a wrap up on the feeling and the gameplay and all of those elements that just made it a brilliant experience for me. I have to say that, not giving the game a score, but my experience overall was a perfect 10 for me. I never had an issue. Didn't have a technical issue the entire time in over 70 something hours of playing. Never had an issue of frustration. I never hit a thing where I felt like my progression was blocked needlessly. I never felt like there was something missing. Everything about it was so wonderful. And then it was exactly what I wanted. It was more than I thought we were going to get, even as far as how expansive the environments were and how much there was to do, and just doing everything, going to the Rose Garden and doing street fights there, and doing the exhibitions and tournaments and things. I was so involved in the whole experience. And on top of that too, then just those little extras of I wasn't sure I would actually care at all about changing my outfits and stuff like that, and I totally got into it. I don't know why. And wearing my t-shirt from the hotel with the big heart and and her face in the middle, and then my crazy rainbow jacket from fishing, and like buying different other outfits and stuff like that. I don't know why I got into that, but I was really into it. Different Shenmue III t-shirts for him. I just got so into that, those things there, and the phone calls also to characters that you're familiar with, and really giving it another tangible way of tying it to Shenmue 1 and 2. And with the phone calls, it reminds me to mention that I did play it entirely in Japanese. I'm going to replay it in English at some point, not a long playthrough like this, just through a story. But Shenmue 1 and 2, after I played them for the first time in Japanese on Dreamcast, after years of Shenmue 1 on the Dreamcast, Shenmue 2 on the Xbox, I enjoy this experience so much more in Japanese. It's a different feel. It depends. The English one, of course, has a nostalgic appeal to me and a kind of campiness that adds an interesting element, but the Japanese one gives it slightly a different tone, and I enjoy that tone more when it comes to the narrative and a lot of the dialogue. And then an entire temple dedicated to the Save Shenmue thing, an entire thing dedicated to fans, and there's so many little notebooks in the hotel, names, different things throughout the game that were really emblematic of a mission to create something truly made for fans of Shenmue 1 and 2. This wasn't really something that had a feeling of, I'm trying to be current and attract new fans and be modern. It felt more like, this is a gift to people that have loved those first two for so long. This is exactly this is Shenmue 3. This is Shenmue 3 as it could have been, would have been, should have been, and now is. That's what it was, and there's so many little nods to that, and then the big giant nod to that with the Save Shenmue, going to the temple, and all those pictures of backers and all the different things going on, and the cool little capsule toys, and then the amazing viewing area out back. I loved out on that deck at certain times of day, and then going down to the fishing area down there. So much that was so beautiful and wonderful. The one element I'll talk about now that I got through that is not my 100% favorite in the series. It's not a complaint about Shenmue 3, it's more of just a comparison to how much I like things in Shenmue 1 and 2. Shenmue 2 is still my favorite story-wise. I think there was just so much in Shenmue 2 narrative-wise. It's incredibly vast and dense as far as what actually happens over the course of Shenmue 2. Shenmue 1 obviously fantastic and really gets the adventure going, but then I feel like the adventure expands and it explodes in narrative fashion in 2 with 3 different environments, and each one's so different, and there's so much going on. I feel like if you really looked at what happened, and 3 felt like not as much story-wise happened. Like we weren't pushed as far in Shenmue 3 story-wise as, say, Shenmue 2 took us, and as far, so Shenmue 2 overall I think is my favorite story-wise, but Shenmue 3, that's not to say that it was bad story-wise or that it was disappointing story-wise, because it wasn't. It just felt like it focused more on those day-to-day elements that I was talking about. It focused more on living in these environments more so than progressing the narrative. And that depends just really, whether you liked it or not, what you were expecting and you wanted out of the narrative elements of the game. And for me, I'm fine with this because knowing going in is just the next chapter and it's not finishing up and it's not wrapping things up. It's kind of what I expected narrative-wise as far as how much story it gave us. And I was just so in rapture in the day-to-day elements and just living in these places that it was enough for me. And I feel like it might not be enough for some people, but I felt like it was enough for me, and it was enough of a build-up. I loved when in the end where you cross the river and the journey up to the castle and the fight against everyone reminded me of the fight at the end of Shenmue 1 in a way, and then you build up to going in with Londi, and I loved how it joined up with so many colorful and interesting characters. Ren was, I love him so much, but from 2, but again, he was great in that too, and it gave you some answers, but then also created more mysteries, but it didn't bring you a large step closer to the end of the saga in a way. It was more of a small step in the narrative focus, but that ending, I'm really excited for Shenmue 4 now. I want to be on the Great Wall and see what's going on. I want to really get into the next chapter. But to me, it was not the greatest, again, Shenmue 2 I like better story-wise so far in the series, but to me it was more than satisfactory. I felt narratively fulfilled in as far as what the story played as it's part of the overall package, because I feel like it was just a smaller part of the package than, say, in something like Shenmue 1 and 2, but it was, the part that it did play, I think it played well, and I loved it. I don't have any real complaints. Again, it's not a complaint, just a comparison to where that's the one part that's not my absolute favorite in the series, but the overall experience is my favorite. This is my new favorite Shenmue game, and I'm so looking forward to what's going on in the future. This was a long video because I had so much to talk about, and there's still more I could talk about, but I think I'll leave it at that and just say that I am so thankful that this exists and happy that I was able to experience it, and the experience was everything I wanted it to be and more. It's a dream come true, and it made me more excited for the future of the franchise than ever before, and I can't wait to see where things are going. It's just, this was such an incredible experience, and again, this is not so much talking about the game and how I would rate it in the fashion of a traditional review. It's more of what did I personally experience and how did I like that experience, and to me it was a perfect experience. I have zero issues. It was one of the best gaming experiences I've ever had, well worth the wait, lived up to nearly 2 decades of hype. Shenmue 3 is amazing, and my hopes are sky high for the future.